sequel to the resignation of the former head of the interim national government and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Chief Ernest Shonekan, and my subsequent appointment as head of state and commander-in-chief, I have had extensive consultations within the armed forces hierarchy and other well-meaning Nigerians in a bid to find solutions to the various political, economic, and social problems which have engulfed our beloved country and which have made life most difficult to the ordinary citizens of this nation.
General Sani Abacha, former Nigeria military head of state. Born in Kano in 1943, Sani Abacha was not the loudest child in the room, but he was always the one watching, observing, learning. From a young age, he had a quiet intensity about him, a deep hunger not for applause, but for control. He joined the Nigerian army in 1963, and by the time of the 1966 coups, Abacha had become a figure in the background, never at the center of the spotlight, but always near the power. While others talked, Abacha listened. While others shouted, he whispered. And in those whispers, history began to bend. Abacha's role in Nigeria's military coups was surgical. When he announced the 1983 coup that removed Shehu Shagari, he did so on television with a calmness that was almost eerie. His voice, firm but devoid of emotion, became the soundtrack of transitions. He rose through the ranks, first brigadier, then major general. He served under General Babangida, watching how promises were made and broken, how democracy could be dangled like bait and withdrawn like a blade. By 1993, when Nigeria trembled under the annulment of MKO Abiola's election, Abacha was ready. The year was 1993. Nigeria was a nation teetering on the brink. The annulment of June 12, the freest and fairest election in its history, had left the people stunned, furious, and betrayed. MKO Abiola, the presumed winner, had been cast aside. General Babangida, facing mounting unrest, stepped aside and installed Ernest Shonekan, the technocrat, to lead the interim national government. But in the shadows of Doden Barracks, General Sani Abacha waited. On November 17, 1993, without firing a single bullet, he dissolved the interim government and declared himself head of state. His speech was as calm as ever measured, lacking flamboyance.
Consequently, the following decisions come into immediate effect. The interim national government is hereby dissolved. The national and state assemblies are also dissolved. The state executive councils are dissolved. The brigade commanders are to take over from the governors in their states until administrators are appointed. Where there are no brigade commanders, the commissioners of police in the states are to take over. All local governments stand dissolved. The directors of personnel are to take over the administration of the local governments until administrators are appointed. The National Electoral Commission is hereby dissolved. All former secretaries to federal ministries are to hand over to their director generals until ministers are appointed. The two political parties are hereby dissolved. All processions, political meetings and associations of any type in any part of the country are hereby banned. Any consultative committee, by whatever name called, is hereby proscribed. Decree 61 of 1993 is hereby abrogated. A provisional ruling council is hereby established. It will comprise the head of state, commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as chairman, the chief of general staff as vice chairman, the honorable minister of defense, the chief of defense staff, service chiefs, the Inspector General of Police, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, the Internal Affairs Minister, the Foreign.
Abacha wasted no time. All democratic institutions were dismantled overnight. The national and state assemblies gone. Political parties dissolved. Civil liberties suspended. He replaced civilian governors with military administrators loyal, obedient, and answerable only to him. A decree followed another, many carrying retroactive punishments, meaning you could be punished for an offense that wasn't illegal when you committed it. The judiciary became a mere ornament. The legislature a memory. The military command reorganized to ensure loyalty. Decree number 2 allowed detention without trial. Suspects could be held for months or years based solely on suspicion. No lawyer. No hearing. No escape. Underneath it all was a chilling stillness. Nigeria was no longer governed, it was commanded. And the man at the center of it all, he rarely smiled. He rarely spoke to the public. His face was a portrait of discipline. His mind, a maze few could navigate. But his grip was absolute. In less than 6 months, Sani Abacha became the most powerful Nigerian leader since independence. With power now concentrated in his hands, Abacha transformed the state into a fortress. His enemies became ghosts vanishing without trace, silenced with precision. Fear became currency. Silence is survival. His government created what many Nigerians call the reign of the phantom. You never saw the hammer fall, but you felt its echo. The State Security Service, the SSS, Directorate of Military Intelligence, DMI, and a slew of military tribunals operated without checks. Abacha's security network was a sprawling web, and he sat at the center like a spider with poisoned fangs. By 1995, the world's attention turned to Ken Saro-Wiwa, the Agoni environmental activist. His movement for the survival of the Agoni people, MOSOP, challenged Shell Petroleum and accused the government of complicity in the ecological destruction of the Niger Delta. Saro-Wiwa was arrested along with 8 others. After a trial many deemed a sham, they were sentenced to death. On November 10, 1995, they were hanged. The world erupted. Sanctions came swiftly. Nigeria was suspended from the Commonwealth of Nations. Countries cut ties. Foreign investors fled. But Abacha didn't flinch. Instead, he strengthened his inner circle, appointing loyalists, rewarding silence, and eliminating threats. Many more would fall. Shehu Musa Yar'Adua, a former vice president, was arrested in 1995 for an alleged coup plot. He died in prison in 1997. Olusegun Obasanjo, another former head of state, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Kudirat Abiola, the outspoken wife of MKO Abiola, was gunned down in Lagos in 1996, allegedly by government death squads. The message was clear: speak, and you will be silenced. Meanwhile, the wealth of the nation flowed like a secret river into private coffers. Abacha and his associates began what would later be described as one of the most audacious looting operations in African history. Funds were funneled out through bogus security contracts, false foreign debt repayments, and direct theft from the Central Bank of Nigeria. Shell companies in Europe, offshore accounts in Switzerland, stacks of dollars in private residences, over $3 billion disappeared into the wind. And yet, paradoxically, the naira remained stable, and civil service salaries were paid on time. Roads were repaired. Police got new vehicles. Some Nigerians, even in hindsight, called it disciplined corruption. But make no mistake, Nigeria had become a police state wrapped in a military robe, soaked in oil and silence. As 1997 turned to 1998, Abacha began a move to transform himself into a civilian president. 5 political parties were formed and all 5 endorsed him as their sole candidate. No debate. No rivals. Just one man in a beret marching toward a coronation. But fate, they say, fears no general. And even the most silent tyrant must one day face the voice of history. By 1997, General Sani Abacha had grown into more than a ruler. He had become a myth, a ghost wrapped in a green uniform. Publicly, he moved little. Rarely spoke. He was mostly seen at official functions with stone-faced composure, surrounded by tight-lipped generals. But in the shadows, he was orchestrating a heist of historic proportions. He didn't just loot. He industrialized corruption. His close associate, Dismela Guozo, the national security advisor, was key to the operation. Together, they invented a new playbook, a claim urgent national security threats, a request emergency funds, and then withdraw hundreds of millions of dollars in cash. Money meant for defense contracts. For the fight against insurgents. For state development. It was withdrawn from the Central Bank of Nigeria, stuffed into bags, and moved by private jets and convoys. Some dollars were hidden in bunkers. Others traveled across borders to Swiss accounts, Cayman Islands companies, and European investments. Abacha's children, especially Mohammed Abacha, were deeply embedded in this network. The family name became a password for offshore transfers. Shell companies appeared like mushrooms, Allied Network, Durable Properties, NASCO Management Services. All used to funnel illicit funds abroad. When investigators later traced the cash trail, it led to frozen accounts in Switzerland, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, and Jersey. Countries once indifferent to Nigerian suffering were now pressured into cooperating. By the early 2000s, more than $3 billion was recovered and billions more were suspected to still be hidden. This was ghost money. Money that never existed in budgets. Never passed through tenders. Money that haunted Nigeria's hospitals, roads, and schools in their absence. And yet, paradoxically, Abacha kept the country stable, at least on paper. Inflation was controlled. Salaries were paid. He even initiated the Petroleum Trust Fund, PTF, which brought modest development to roads, healthcare, and education. To some Nigerians, especially in the north, he was not a thief, he was a stabilizer, a provider. But those who asked questions, those who demanded transparency, they ended up in detention, in exile, or dead. The man who never laughed had become the emperor of silence and gold. But as history has shown, even kings drown in their own rivers. On the night of June 7, 1998, General Sani Abacha went to bed in Abuja. He had just returned from a trip to Togo and was planning for the transition to civilian rule with himself, of course, as the only candidate. Posters already filled the streets. 5 political parties, all state-sponsored, had each nominated him as their sole flag-bearer. It was to be the final chapter. The transition from khaki to Agboda. From general to president. From ruler to legend. But in the early hours of June 8, something happened. The details were, and remain, murky. Some say he collapsed in his Osorok residence. Others whispered that he died during a private encounter with Indian prostitutes flown in that weekend, a rumor as salacious as it was persistent. Official statements claimed a heart attack. Others said it was poison, perhaps from within his own inner circle. There were whispers of spiritual retribution, that the souls of the executed and silenced had come for him. In truth, very few knew. His body was quickly flown to Kano, his hometown. Buried within hours. No autopsy. No state funeral. No photographs. Just silence. The man who had ruled Nigeria with shadow and fear vanished without a trace. The shock across Nigeria was instant and complicated. Some celebrated openly in the streets. In Lagos and Ibadan, horns blared and drinks flowed. Activists wept not in grief, but in relief. Others mourned. In Kano, thousands gathered. For them, he had defended the North, kept prices low, restored pride. They remembered him not as a dictator, but as a father. Power passed swiftly to General Abdul Salami Abubakar, who, in a stunning reversal, began releasing political prisoners and laid the groundwork for the return to democracy in 1999. And as Nigeria turned the page, the Abacha name didn't fade. Instead, it became a headline again and again. Switzerland returns $700 million in Abacha loot. Abacha's son agrees to repatriation deal. The Abacha family denies wrongdoing. Where is the rest of the money? Even in death, Abacha's ghost still haunted the nation's treasury. Today, the name Abacha splits opinion. To some, he was a monster. To others, the misunderstood protector. But to all, he was a symbol, a reminder of what unchecked power looks like. There is no monument grand enough to contain the silence he wielded. But there are scars. In the prisons once filled with journalists. In the unmarked graves of critics. In the billions stolen. In the headlines that never fade. Sani Abacha ruled Nigeria without laughter, without apology, without fear. And when he died, he left behind a silence even history finds hard to fill. If you have watched this far, kindly like, comment, share and subscribe for more stories like this.